Hello and welcome to another episode of Literary as FECK with myself, DBag502, and himself.
Clive,
Ah, perfect. So this
I hope you're
time,
not going to be silly in this episode, Nick,
no. Um,
because there's a serious totalitarianism we're talking
uh,
about.
yes, you're right. You're right, Clive. So my choice for this time was Jack London's not terribly good 1908 novel, The Iron Heel. And as a result of it not being terribly good, and to get ahead of this, I like Jack London quite a bit. I
Yes,
think that the Sea Wolf is one of the best nautical tales ever put down.
it's nautical
Uh,
as fuck.
yeah, big fan. I quite like Martin Eden. And part of the problem with me not liking the Iron Heel is it seems like a retread of Martin Eden in some ways, just with a slightly more apocalyptic vision.
Yeah,
Um,
Call of the Wild is good.
Call of the Wild's good. John Barleycorn, or I think
Yeah,
it's his book about
yeah.
alcoholism. Great book.
I'm
So
not sure we've talked Jack London on here before, but I know we're both kind of fans. And
mm,
again, so many of his things we haven't read, right? But it is
yes.
worth noting, um, once upon a time when Jack London was at his peak, I
Mm,
mean, he was like a fucking Hollywood rock star, wasn't he? Like he
oh
was
yes.
revered.
Yeah, and a massively prolific for a guy who is actually, didn't live a full life, right? He
Mm.
died relatively young. He
Just like
produced an
that
enormous,
Jesus fella.
yes, yeah, but produced an enormous amount of writing. And
Have you seen the size of the Bible, Nick? Written by Jesus himself.
Jesus
I've got it.
himself,
Yeah.
yes. Um, so yeah, I was always interested in the Iron Heel because I understood that it was one of the major influences on George Orwell's 1984.
Right. And
Um,
you're a big fan of shoes as well.
I do like a good pair of brogues.
Yeah.
So so yeah, I was interested, and then recent events south of the Canadian border have also the drift in towards a sort of an oligarchical kind of American version of
Those
fascism.
fuckers in Wisconsin.
you know, um, you know, I was interested in reading because this book, is well known, I think, for being it was considered very prescient after the rise of fascism, right? Because this book does outline in 1908, kind of, in a more in a yellow journalism kind of a way, but it does kind of get ahead of what ultimately happens in Europe, right? With the rise of socialism, with the rise of,
Right.
especially after the Russian Revolution, the fears of the ultra wealthy and the drift towards a kind of, yeah,
Here's a question for you. Is this the book that coined the term mercenary?
I
I
don't know.
ask just because
Hmm.
whenever it's used in the book, it has a capital M.
Right.
So I was just wondering if this is where it originates from.
Mercs. Yeah, I don't know. Could be.
Because the
Uh,
mercenaries in this film are slightly different. They're not necessarily um, doing it for money, right?
mhm.
They're a bit more and another arm of politics, right? But I just thought it was interesting that it was always a big M.
Capital M. Hmm. Don't know. So, I mean, I don't know if it's really worth getting into the plot so much.
Well, let me tell you then what I was slightly surprised about it was because,
Okay.
like you, yes, I've always wanted to read it. It's always been contextualized for me as the other book that we're going to talk about a little bit as well is that they're pre 1984 books, right?
Yeah. Mm.
And so I was kind of a little bit surprised because obviously 1984, Orwell's 1984 is clearly a cautionary tale of well, particularly Stalinism, right?
Yeah, or any kind of absolutism, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
but definitely of that leftist ilk, if
Mm.
you see what I mean.
Yeah.
So I was kind of surprised that Iron Heel was more about fascism than it was, and I was expecting
Right.
the other
But
kind
I
of.
think 1984 is, I mean, I think, we know it's a political circle, right? And
Yeah,
you
absolutely.
end up
Yeah,
in the same place. The ultra far right and the ultra far left, you end
yeah.
up in
In the end, yeah. No, no.
the same
I
place.
get it, but what I mean is the starting point for 1984 is clearly Soviet,
Right. I mean,
right?
he's just done Animal Farm, which was
Yeah,
the same
yeah,
thing, right? Yeah.
yeah.
Um,
But so I was expect I didn't realize that
well,
yeah, I was
socialism is
expecting
very
it to come from
much the
the left
hero,
more,
right?
right? Huh?
No, I mean, socialism is very much the hero of the
Yes,
Iron
exactly.
Curtain.
That's what I was kind of surprised because, and to the extent that until about, I don't know, halfway or three or quarters of the way through, when I realized, oh, it's not going to spring a surprise on me. I thought maybe the big surprise was going to be that the earnest character, the
Hmm.
kind of
Yeah.
super wobbly, uh,
Yeah. Ernest Everhard, which is
he
the
yes,
greatest porn name
he was going
ever
to
not
end
used.
up becoming the villain of the piece. And what was going to be clever about the book was how, he justified it every step of the way, and we weren't sure as readers, like, oh, hang on, when did he? And I thought, oh, that's going to be
Ah,
clever. And I kind of
that is a
expected
good
it.
book that you've just written,
Yeah,
Clive.
thanks very
Um,
much. Um, I just have to get a time machine now and go back and be all clever
mhm.
about it. But it was oh no, this is as polemical as it is from page
Mm.
one, right? There's no real
Yes.
change, and it's narrated through his.
Adoring wife's eyes,
Yes,
which also
yes.
is deeply problematic, I think. Some hilarious kind of heaving bosoms kind of writing in this that it's like Mills and Boone style socialism, which may be a thing that Jack
But
London
also
has,
written by a man, right? A lot of
but
things. Yeah,
totally
it
written by
wasn't
a man.
even a question of whether I was gonna, as before I even had time to, fight back or think about it. I was in his iron grip, and
Oh yeah. He
yeah,
was a he was a Superman, a blonde beast such as Nietzsche had described, and in addition, he was aflame with democracy.
right.
He's, yeah, he's a rock hard socialist. Yeah. So, I mean, but the thing is, so the book
Rocco Siffredi plays Woody Guthrie.
exactly. Uh, so,
I would actually watch that. There'd be a lot of like guitars being shoved up assholes.
God. Um, so yeah, I mean, so basically, this is so Martin Eden is a book that he had written. I don't know how close to when he wrote this, but Martin Eden kind of has the same character at its heart, right? He's a young working class lad who's kind of self-educated autodidact who becomes an ardent dyed-in-the-wood socialist, and in that book, the idea is it's almost like like some sort of Planet of the Apes cautionary tale, like, oh, don't educate yourself, don't become a really smart working class person because you'll recognize that there is no hope and no future. And ultimately, in that book, huge spoiler, Martin Eden kills himself because he's not able to change the world to kind of meet his radical vision, and it's yeah, it's kind of it's a heavy book, but it's a better book than this. So this kind of takes that character in a way and repurposes him for the idea of this socialist apocalypse, right?
Yes, and also seen through the eyes of someone else as well.
Right. Um, and so what's strange is there's a frame narrative around the frame narrative because on the one hand, the story's being told to us supposedly by Ernest's adoring wife, but then there's a larger frame where this is being presented as something that's all happened like hundreds and hundreds of years in the past, and it's after a three
Right.
or 400 year long reign of this
It's
autocratic
about now, isn't
oligarch.
it? I think, or I got the feeling there are some dates they throw out. They say 150 years, and then I was trying to work it for. I think it's about now, or maybe in a couple of decades in the future.
Well, I thought it was far more for because I thought they were establishing that after this happens and the oligarchy comes into power, that the oligarchy is there for 300 or 400 years. And then there's
Oh,
a revolution
okay.
against the oligarchy that takes it, yeah, way further in the future. And now
That may
that
have bounced off, man. Like you said, it's not. I mean, it's not terrible by any means, but it is the least of all the Jack London books
yep,
I've read thus far.
yes. And part of that is because the book is really not a book; it's a pamphlet. It's a very long pamphlet,
Big
right?
fucking pamphlet. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and so. So yes, well, we do have this weird thing, this weird kind of like far future frame, and so it allows the author to put in these little footnotes, kind of these pithy footnotes about like, oh, imagine back then when people had to struggle for a
Mm.
crust of bread, and when before we had reached this this level of utopian socialism that we're in now.
But
Um,
oddly enough, there's like little bits which seem very like, oh, everything else is, oh, it's so, I couldn't remember. However, I can quote this H.G. Wells story exactly like
hmm
there's clearly little things which
hmm
he loves, right? And he really wants you to know that he's
Yes.
behind them, right? So they're kind of
Yes.
shoehorned in there.
Mhm. And so it actually becomes, in some of its more interesting parts, the last third of the book is all action. And in a way, the last third of the book is, for me, the most interesting part, because the first two thirds, we just have this kind of straw man, who, again, I agree with 90% of what he's saying, but that doesn't mean that the book is good, right? Just
Right,
because
right,
the
right,
politics
right, right.
are,
I know what you're saying.
and I
I mean,
think,
to be honest, I found it slightly the opposite. The action, I glazed over through a lot of that. And even though I was kind of,
mhm,
rolling my eyes at some of that stuff, at least I was kind of
engaged,
engaged. Yeah. Yeah.
right. Um, but like it does it, but what was interesting to me about that was it does get kind of H.G. Wells because it's 1908. This is pre-World War One, so his conception of this massive kind of civil war in the U.S. between the forces of oligarchy and the kind of socialistic forces seems very like dirigibles and like balloons, and it's a steampunk, you know.
Yeah, but not enough to be fun.
No, no, because it's not far enough in the future. He's only supposed to, he's only
Right.
setting the story like a decade or something in the future from 1908, right? I think, or like yeah, it's yeah, he's not imagining a far future in those sections of the book, right? Um, but as I said, I mean, the prescient part of it is he does do a pretty good job of outlining basically the rise of socialism and the inevitable backlash from the forces of reaction and
Right.
you
Right.
know, um,
I'm wondering,
yeah.
I, having not read enough Jack London to be an authority to say, but I'm getting I'm wondering if the thing with Jack London is, so for instance, there's a whole section of the book when they're on the run, right?
Mhm.
And they're traveling across. And I'm thinking specifically of parts in John Barleycorn, for example, which I really like, and
Mm.
some of the stuff in there about like the fishing village community and stuff
Mhm.
like that. It's so rich, you can smell
Yeah.
it. It's just a
Mhm.
pleasure to read it. And I'm thinking, wow, I know this isn't a book about that, but this there's a glimpses when they hide out at some place and he describes the place that they're hiding out and whatever. I'm thinking, wow, if he concentrated on this, like I can imagine a whole run of books just about the different places that they went
Right.
to. That would be so much better. So I'm wondering if the genius of Jack London is maybe the minutiae, and then
Right.
when he's writing stuff on this huge canvas,
Mhm.
it's maybe not his. I might be wrong, but there might be another great Jack London book which is on this. But thus far, everything I've read from him that I really liked, it's always quite precise and small.
Yeah, observed from life,
Yeah,
I think.
yeah,
Yes. Um, so, yeah, as I said, really, the first two thirds of the book is just Ernest showing up places and lecturing people about you know, and then people, and including his wife, right? And basically, his wife is an upper middle class kind of white woman who, yeah, who falls for him, and then it has her eyes, opened to the injustices of the world, and and then there's a priest character as well who's used to for the same thing, who realizes that he's just not helping, and that he goes out and he becomes, and I think that part's actually. It reminded me a bit of like Babbitt, that Sinclair Lewis book about this idea of like, what happens when your eyes are opened, and you kind of have some choices to make whether or not you go all in on the revolution and trying to help people and stuff, or whether you kind of go, okay, if I pour my life into that, is it going to make my life really uncomfortable, and I'm going to end up, at the very best, an outcast, and at the worst, in jail and murdered. Um, and so, yeah, the priest character is kind of a um, like a one, and I think that all seemed real to me. I'd imagine that, yeah, if you do go against your class interests, right? I think historically speaking, things don't often work well for you if you're from the upper classes, right? And you throw your lot in with revolution.
Mm.
Um, um,
Well, the other thing as well I noted where was so you can only take it this certain amount. So there's a scene where he goes, there's a huge event where it looks like he's been set up to be mocked by all these upper class people, but he
right.
shows it to them, right? And
Mhm.
we get the beginning of it, like someone says blah, 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 whatever, and he's like, well, no, so because and then okay, so and then at a certain point he goes, and then he all manner of, and he struck back with barbed kind of replies that skewered everything they were saying, and he laid everything out, and I was thinking, yeah, okay, so what did he say? Like,
Right.
it kind of stops short of actually being able to back
Right.
it up. Do you know what I
Mm.
mean? Like, it goes to a certain extent, like it's yeah, it's socialism 101, and then everything beyond that slightly obfuscated, because obviously Jack
Right.
London isn't him, right?
Right. Yes. Yeah. And so yeah, and I mean ultimately we know from the frame narrative that the whole the revolution, the socialist revolution is doomed to failure, right? That we're going to get 400 years of the Iron Heel. And the Iron Heel, even as a metaphor, I mean that's definitely picked up by Orwell, right? I mean one of the most famous lines of 1984 is you want to picture the future, imagine a human like a boot stomping on a human face forever.
Mm.
I think it's a good metaphor. Um, um, but yeah,
Although
overall,
I can't imagine a wooden heel in the face for the rest of your life would be any less.
that's
Um,
true. A clog.
any type of a heel made from custard, if it's in your face the whole time, that's not going to be pleasant.
No, you'll drown.
Yeah,
But but yeah. So as I said, yeah, I mean, I don't know. Overall, this is a book that I should have read when I was 19, and I probably would have loved it.
right, right. Yes, no, no.
Um, but it
Agreed.
was not a book to read at 50. And the funny thing is, it was so I didn't read it back then, but I did attempt to read We back when I was 19, right, or
Yeah.
18, right,
Well, here we
right.
go. For those who know the show, for you, you may be aware that Nick is constantly telling me and moaning, I haven't got any time. Oh, but then
Yes, for some reason
suddenly
I sound like a
decided,
90-year-old man.
yeah, I can barely eat cornflakes in the
Hmm.
morning. And then he decided, oh, we're going to read another whole book. Okay then. So we did. I'm kind of surprised though.
Yeah, yeah, fair dues to you. Well, it is the summertime for me, so I have a little more time. And I think mostly because I realized that what we have said about that this is all I had to say about the Iron Heel was that it's not the book. It is exactly the book I would have wanted it to be when I was 19, and that's not the book I wanted to read now.
Right.
And I think, although I think it's important and it's prescient, I think it's far less a book than, yeah, all of the other Jack London books, and certainly than the thing it inspired, right? It's not, 1984 is a much better book.
Yeah, of course. But
Um,
yes, let's talk about
Yeah. So way back in the way back, right,
Yevgeny Zamyatin. Right?
yeah, right after I read 1984 and loved it, I then went out and I think I probably read Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, right afterwards because they're often paired together, right? And I haven't read that since. I haven't read that since, and I wonder about that. I may have to read that again soon just to
Brave New World.
get the shape of it again.
Yeah, I haven't read that since school. I
Yeah, me neither.
I don't remember loving it in the way that
Mhm.
I love 1984.
Right.
I just remember
But I wonder if that's if
appreciating it, maybe.
if I had the same problem with it then that I had with We at that point when I attempted to read We, because We is often so We is by a dystopian novel by Russian writer, can't say his name, Yevgeny Zamyatin.
Zamyatin.
Sometimes emphasized as Eugene Zamyatin, written in 1920-21. So right after the kind of Russian Revolution is just getting going, he writes this book that questions the whole kind of Taylorization and he writes a very dystopian look at, and again, whether it's a socialist. or I don't think it's almost apolitical. It's almost just about the idea of freedom being annihilated, and yeah, but anyway, it wasn't successful in Russia. Then I think it annoyed the powers that be. It annoyed Lenin and stuff. That this book was less than utopian, right? That it was a dystopian take on the whole project. But anyway, I read it then and didn't finish it. I didn't like it at all. I remember starting it and being like, no, this isn't for me. And to me, it lacked what I liked about 1984 was that sense of just grime and grit and just kind of like overarching like sadness and uh yeah, there's something about 1984 that's really just unrelentingly awful, right?
Yeah, I think it
And
also helps that when we were young'uns, we probably read it and were exposed to, and I know some people don't like the 1980s film version,
yeah,
but the one thing that has going for it is John
don't hurt.
Hurt's face.
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
if he'd have done nothing else,
He
he
was
was
born to
born
play
to
Winston
be
Smith.
in that film, right? Yeah.
Mm. Yes. And the surprise for me is spoilers here. I fucking loved We this time. The 50-year-old me is a very different person, evidently. I there's a thread of humor in this book that either
Mm.
went over my head completely the first time I read it, or I was like annoyed that it was there. I don't know which is which. I just think I didn't get it. I didn't get how funny it was at all the first time I read it. And this time I was multiple places where I highlighted because I go, that's great. That's a great idea. That's a
Yeah.
great term phrase.
I tried it not that long ago and didn't get on with it at all. And I thought, oh, I'll give it a go. And I was also surprised. I think what I was most surprised at was, sometimes this happens when you give up on a book and when you come back to it, you have almost no preconceptions at all because
Right.
it's just, And I think the thing with I took away from it this time. Whereas obviously we're talking Iron Heel is very polemical, and also
Mhm.
1984 is about a very specific um, fear or paranoia, and a
Mhm.
very real world one.
Mhm.
We struck me as so his kind of um, coming to understand this other world, a potential parallel world to the one he lives in, and it felt more existential
Oh
than
yeah.
political, right?
It's basically yeah, it's all about belief. It's all about it's like he has a religious fervor, and also I think his personality is such that he's very, very disturbed by anything outside of this very rigid
Right.
kind of, and so it's yeah, you're right. It's all about his inner struggle with falling away from the faith, and there's a lot of it's just him like a hair shirt self-flagellating through the book around why am I having these doubts and why am I, and I I suspect that this was actually a big influence on there's a character who's one of the leads in that Andor series recently, which is kind of in some ways a 1984, like the Star Wars version of 1984. And there's a lead character in that who's very much, I think, drawn from the lead in We. This kind of like uptight, um, sort of anal, retentive, guy who ends up kind of falling in with fascism or space fascism purely because it suits his personality. He's like, I don't
Space
like,
fascism, the
yeah,
worst kind.
I don't, he's uncomfortable with things not being rigid and clear and people adhering to the rules and the laws. And um, I mean, I'm just going to go through a few of the
Well,
quotes that I
just to
go ahead.
carry on that point while you look it up. I to the point when I was thinking, wow, this is almost because of the time and the place it was written, you can kind of see why it might have, and obviously it did have an influence on. We'll talk about that a little bit more, I suppose, on Orwell, right, directly. But
Oh yeah.
um, so I think retrospective, we think of it as a political allegory or whatever, and I'm sure that's probably there to a certain extent. But watching this, I was thinking, well, you don't. That's not even. I'm wondering if that's something we foisted on it just because of the part of the world it comes from in a way. Like if this was somewhere else, you wouldn't necessarily consider it. It's a bit closer as a weird, but it's a bit closer in tone to something like Office Space. You know, like a
Yes.
guy just kind of
Yes.
just fucking fed up of the
Hmm.
grind and just
Hmm.
trying to kind of you know find an alternate way to live. Does that make sense to
No,
you? Yeah.
I no, it does. It does. I mean, there's parts where things are more explicit. Like so, our lead character D50 something. He D503. He's engineering this spacecraft that's going to take their vision of
The Intrepid or something like that it's called.
yeah, yes,
Yeah.
the Integral, something like that.
And yeah.
And it's gonna go out into space as a kind of like, and this part I think is later on somebody actually uses the word conquistador, and so you're like, oh yeah, I mean that's kind of clearly what's being set up here. We have the best civilization. We figured it all out, and we're
Mm.
gonna go share it with you primitives around the rest of the galaxy, so that you also can give up freedom and become like us and live in the best way. And so there is that. It's easy to see the kind of hubris and the chauvinism of like the West as it moves into South America, as it moves into China, these other places, bringing the best culture, you know, and and why that should be viewed with the suspicion that it was viewed and is viewed by indigenous peoples around the world of like, yeah, is this the best way to live? With your shitty, highly processed foods and you're having to work, 10 hours a day. Um, so, but like quite near the beginning, there's a scene where he says, "The sky is blue. Its limpidness is not marred by a single cloud. How primitive was the taste of the ancients, since their poets were always inspired by these senseless, formless, stupidly rushing accumulations of steam." The guy hates clouds, and that's when I first kind of just laughed out loud. I was like, "Oh fuck, this is genius! Like this
Right.
is
Right.
like." And there's multiple great moments, or like there's a moment where like he's really upset by the pinkness of a sunset, and he has to turn his chair away from the window because he's like, "Oh, that's way too much, man!" Like, you
And his
know,
his hands freak him out, because they've still got hairs. He's got atavistic
yes,
hands, right?
very concerned about
Yeah.
his monkey arms. Yeah, and I just that all that stuff, just how clenched his butthole is for this whole story, and then you start to see that, oh, here's where the 1984-ness of it all comes in. Like he meets this young woman, right, and
Yes.
falls obsessively in love with her, right. Although he has in this utopian dystopian future, he does actually already have a kind of a girlfriend. He's in a love. He's got a state-sponsored love triangle um, with this woman and then this other poet friend of his. But yeah, he falls for this woman, and she's kind of an agent of chaos, right? She kind of
Yeah. Well,
brings out.
everything in the future, including sex and stuff, is regimented and is given a specific time to do it, right? Even like sleeping and
Yes.
everything is like you do things on time, right?
Yeah, it's like Ford's factory thing or Taylor's like, but extended to all of life, right?
Yeah.
And so in fact, the only private time you have is for sex, and you get this little pink card, and
Mm.
you're allowed to draw your blinds. But that's one thing that's quite cool is like it's a kind of panopticon. Everyone works, and I have to say they attempted kind of to do this in the German 1982 TV version to sort of with plexiglass sheets, and they do an okay job of getting
Yeah,
across.
except it's
Yeah.
fucking boring. That's the only thing. Like the visuals are not the problem. Like, yeah, so there's a German version with starring the guy from the Human Centipede. You said, um,
Yes, surprisingly.
um, yeah, that was we've seen Year of the Sex Olympics.
Hmm.
Stoned. There's tape. That awesome Hungarian um version of Flood Myth Gilgamesh we watched.
Gilgamesh, yes,
So
yes.
it's not necessarily a setback, and I quite like the kind of layered, it brought that to life. Everyone has glass walls and stuff. The
Mhm.
problem with that film is it's just hawky and boring, isn't it? I
It's a
thought,
pretty,
at least.
it's fairly
Yeah.
flat. Although the full frontal male nudity and female nudity is always a surprise when you think about it. This was made for TV. Like
Right.
the Germans were much more uh, comfortable with the health and efficiency side of things.
Hmm. Yes, yeah, that has a, a dark history too. But
Mhm.
um, and we shall, while we're in it, just to get it out of the way, there's also a version from very recent, a amalgamation, a Russian version of 1984 and we,
Yes,
which
and
is
I attempted to
fairly
watch it.
intolerable.
10 minutes was all I could handle, and it was very much clearly made on a shoestring budget with like one or two actors, and everything else was green screen and maybe even AI. I suspect it looked like it was
Yeah, I
like
don't know, but it was
it
pretty,
looked it
yeah.
was awful.
But the same basic problem was just talky and boring, and you know, which is
Yes,
something you shouldn't really be accusing this story of. I mean, you've gone way off if you're making this boring,
boring.
right? Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Um, but yeah, so I mean, I do think like it definitely shares the whole Julia side of things, in 1984, right? And how they're exposed, and then they basically end up betraying each other, right?
Hmm.
I mean, that is
Spoiler
the
alert.
love cannot hold up in the face of this kind of totalitarianism. And this is also true. I mean, this thing has it goes, I mean, spoilers, but like our main character gets lobotomized, right?
Yeah.
Ultimately.
Well, the
Um,
other thing as well is I'm not even sure if it's you need to take it that far that love can't hold up because I mean he's being led by the little head, not the big. I'm not sure how much in love
yes.
he is if he's just
Well,
in
fair
lust,
enough.
really. You know,
Fair enough.
um, that's what
Yes.
I mean about no, but I think it's a good point because in general the whole that's why I was saying the difference between this and 1984 and it being less obviously political. This feels more like it feels almost like a he's less a grown man as like a he's almost like a teenager going through puberty or something, isn't he?
Yes. Yes.
So
Yeah,
that's why I
'cause
feel
there's an
the
arrested
slightly
development.
more universal kind of existential kind of parable or allegory or something like that, right? Because at the end, I'm not really sure if he's in a worse or a better place, really. He's just kind of been through a transition.
Right.
I mean, if we're taking it allegorical,
Yes,
right?
yeah.
He's been through, he's seen through the other side, and but he's kind of returned or been forced back. But I'm not sure if and he doesn't regret his time. And but I don't know if he feels like I don't know. Does he seem unhappy to you at the end of
Well,
the
he's been
story?
lobotomized, so yeah, probably
No,
not.
but yeah, but
Right? He probably is happier than he was
hmm,
before. But it's an awfully grim ending, right? Um, but then it also, in a way, the ending also acknowledges that basically, because I think really the fear in this story, the fear of this society is of entropy, right? There's like this
hmm,
the whole idea of, and I think it's a deep-seated human thing. We are coded from very young to be discomforted by the skin that forms on top of your hot chocolate when you're not looking, or like these things that are just kind of like, ooh, that's a bit unsettling and gross, and they bring us back to our mortality too often with um the way that things just fucking accumulate in your house. If you don't like, if you're not on top of things all the time, things are always going to shit. I think it's just the nature of the planet, right?
hmm,
um and so you can see the drive in human beings. We want to control, we want to have things where we're not reminded of our mortality. And that's why I remember going down to, in a much more minor version of this, but like going from Canada down to Mexico for the first time and just constantly seeing like cows dead in the streets, like with their heads being pecked by vultures, and like just the feeling of like, ooh, yeah, you're really reminded a lot more here of like stuff that is kind of hidden from us, I
hmm.
think, in North America anyway. I can't speak again. I remember being a child in Ireland and sometimes finding a dead sheep on the beach and things that were a bit more grisly and
Well, you were the notorious sheep slayer of County Wicklow, right? So that's why that
uh,
was.
shagger, I think the
No, that would have
notorious.
been my end of the woods.
um but but yeah, so I said that whole thread of the book I just found hilarious. I found it hilarious, the unpacking of this guy's
Oh no, it is
absolute
definitely
horror.
It is
Uh,
funny. It's funny and very, very relatable.
hmm.
And
And I think a
yeah.
much better book. I think a much better book than Jack London's The Iron
Yeah,
Heel
I mean, I don't know if
as
we
a
should really
novel.
compare them really. Like you said, one's a polemic, one is something else, isn't it?
And no, and I think they only invite comparison because they are considered to be the two main influences on
Right.
1984. So you naturally read them together, and then.
Yes.
But you're right; they actually don't have a lot of commonality.
No, not at all. Um, like I said, Iron Heel wasn't exactly what I expected it to be
Hmm.
anyway. I don't know if I had real any expectations for this at all. Like I said, I just remember reading it not that like a few years ago because I had it on my shelf. So when you
Hmm.
mentioned reading it, I was like, oh, okay, I just have to pick it up from over there, you know.
Hmm.
But for whatever reason, and I dog-eared it, so I knew exactly how far I'd gone. It's the edition I have is about 230 pages. I'd
Hmm.
gone 60 pages into it
Okay.
and gave up on it. And I'm not quite sure why. I think I was glazing over. I wasn't engaging with
Hmm.
it for some reason. That wasn't a problem this time. So
Hmm. Yeah,
who
well,
knows what that's all about? I don't know.
me too. I definitely remember not liking it at all and not finishing it when I
Mm.
the first time I tried to read it too, and then this time I was taken. I mean, I almost even saw elements of Kurt Vonnegut and some Philip K. Dick in a way in here.
Definitely Vonnegut. Yeah,
Future
yeah, yeah, yeah.
echoes of that. Again, that very acerbic, intelligent use of science fiction to kind of not just dig into, like, it's like a thought experiment, but not just to dig into politics, but in this case, I think what you said, to dig into the human.
Yeah.
Uh,
I wonder though, also, obviously we're reading it in a translation. This is Myra Ginsburg. Um, I've not read any of the Zamyatin, and I'm kind of interested to compare to maybe some other things and how much of it is, because it's entirely possible some of it has been kind of some of those elements are in the translation, if you see
mhm.
what I mean. That does happen occasionally.
Right. Well, speaking of which, do we need to read the Icelandic translation of Dracula? Are you aware of this?
No, but I am aware we're going to run out of time.
Okay, so that
So
we'll have that conversation later
I'm gonna
on then.
stop it now.
Yeah, perfect.
So here I go.